Have you heard of Tucker Goodrich? Yes, I have. I do know him lately. He's gone the Ray Peat route. Yeah, I thought he would. He would. Yeah, it's all about with the PUFA. I thought. Remember, I was saying about the PUFA that eventually this guy may go the other way to the dark side. So he was generalizing because we only talk. Animal PUFA is not a problem. It's only the seed oils and all that, and he's right about that. But the Ray Peats are basically on everything, and so he's basically gone over. He said he now drinks gallons of Mexican Coca-Cola. Seed oils is the only problem in his book. Yeah, look, seed oils is the worst thing. It's very high in deuterium. Another thing that he is completely ignorant about. That's really the problem. If you take, for instance, let's say a plant fat. So all the actual seeds out there and all the actual plants, like nuts and stuff like that. Now, they have a lot of anti-nutrients, a lot of protease inhibitors when it comes to protein. They are not very good for the body. Okay. But a lot of these plant fats, are actually also low in deuterium. I'll say that again. A number of these plant fats are low in deuterium. Even coconut is low in deuterium. Palm oil, low in deuterium, and most of the other olive oil, it's about 130. It's not the lowest, but generally speaking, they're not, like super high. It's the actual industrial process that actually increases the deuterium. It doubles it nearly. That's the problem. That's why when people did consume some of these plant oils in the past, when they were extra virgin olive or extra, extracted in a, what do they call it? It's the cold pressing. It's, the where they had that, or the wheel, the wheel extractor.
Yep.
We need to make a wheel extractor. It's just, I think, people need to see this. They haven't seen it. This is basically, these are the sort of things that they used to have. Like this is a wheel where they have like a lever on top and they just turn it around like that. So that's argan oil. This is a traditional argan oil, which is North African, like in Morocco, places like that. That's the old olive oil stones. So that's the sort of actually on where my sister is on the where she was on the island of Milos. They actually had this old. Now it's in the old days it was donkey that used to drag it around, but now they basically use a mechanical a motor, which is a run on diesel, a diesel motor, a diesel generator that basically does it. But it's the same sort of principle. These are the sort of things that we used in the past. These things, or these are the sort of those traditional grinding stones. And if you go back, this is in ancient times, you can see these old grinding stones and all that they used. So that's how the old methods were that were used. So there's another one, how they would have had the animal and there's sort of pressing on it, and then it's coming out of here, the outlet, and there's a collection jar that would be placed there. So this is how they used to do it. And it was, it was done, so back then, the whole method of extraction, getting coffee on my, finish that off. It's gone cold at the moment. But that's how people used to do it back then. That was how it was done. So people need to realize that it's definitely not like the modern ways. So those oils back then, the way they were extracted. Now, obviously, if you combine sugar and fat, even from oils that are extracted without, so these oils are not going to have all these chemicals in. They're not going to have the high level of primary and secondary oxidative products. They're not going to have the high levels of aldehydes, and they're not going to have the high levels of deuterium. And usually people would extract and use, in many cases. It wouldn't, so, and it was small amounts that they were using anyway, which was another thing. So the level of oxidation, it was tolerable in a sense. But, nowadays the whole process is completely different. And so I'm getting tangled. Oops. So on that issue of the seed oils, he's right about modern seed oils, but ancient seed oils, no, he'd be wrong. They would still be low in deuterium, and they would still have less primary and secondary and oxidative products and aldehydes compared to today's stuff. So there is a big, vast difference. And it's the reason why, somebody that actually just, eats nuts or stuff like that gets some of these seed fats or whatever, like macadamia nuts or whatever else. These people are not going to have like high inflammation or high, problems or stuff like that. But if you extract that with the modern methods and then you put it in a bottle in an industrial system, then you've altered it so radically in terms of aldehydes, primary, secondary oxidative products, that it's no longer the original what it was in that regard. Obviously, animal foods are going to be, and most people used animal fats in the past anyway, are going to be far more stable. And most oils were used for lighting, candles, and lighting within the home, lanterns and stuff like that. That's where they were used primarily. The olive oil trade, even in antiquity, was primarily used for that, not for food. And it was only after the Second World War in Greece where they started using olive oil, because most of the animals had been stolen by the Germans as they were retreating out of Greece. They and the Italians, a lot of them were stolen out because basically they literally raped and pillaged the country. That's the reality. That's what happens in warfare. So when the Americans were trying to reestablish the production line, they said, well, you've got a whole lot of olive trees here. We'll start using the oil for food rather than for, lighting lanterns and, for religious ceremonies and whatever else and other purposes. And that's when there was a big push for electrification, like dams were built on the West Coast where I come from, and many other things to provide electrification and lighting in a more modern way rather than these old lanterns and stuff like that. And so that's how we shifted away from animal fats over time, because it was convenient, easier. You buy the bottle, you're in the city. And there was also a lot of people pushed out of the villages as well, because there was civil war, and the British policy was depopulate a lot of the villages. And when people leave villages, many of times they don't go back because they've moved into the cities. Their life's completely changed, and now they're city slickers. And Greece has got, due to that civil war, has ended up with a much smaller agricultural population and a much larger urban population. So that's a consequence of that civil war between 1946 and for 3 years in 1949. So yeah, changed the dynamics of how things work there. But what I was saying is, he sort of tends to sort of blanket say a statement like it's all seed oils, and it comes back. He views it from the PUFA angle as well. And that's also you'll find in the paleo community, because Tucker, he was influenced by the paleo community. So he's sort of gone back to a more high carb paleo type approach. So because Ray Peat was sort of, some of his followers, I'm not sure about Ray himself, were ex sort of paleo people who were on mixed diets. And Ray Peat's diet is very much a mixed diet. It's, animal foods that are high in saturated fats, which has got this reverse electron transport, plus a lot of tubers and stuff like that. And that's very much what the paleo movement was in the early days to some extent. Had tubers and animal foods and some other things. So it was a bit more like the zone diet back then. So So I wasn't surprised, having looked at some of Tucker's sort of stuff recently, that he was shifting in that direction. I did fear that he was going to become Ray Peat, as well, go down the Ray Peat pathway. So it doesn't surprise me at all. This is the problem when people have a narrow perspective, a reductionist view of the world. They become very susceptible to reductionist thinking that sort of falls within their thinking process, and that's why me and Bart thought he would go that way, that a few others would go down that pathway, because they had very much that sort of reductionist thinking. The person who surprised us the most was Salad Boy, Saladino. He surprised us the most, because if you look at his earlier works and earlier videos and even his book, he cites a whole lot of things, but he seemed to basically not be thinking in those terms. And then all of a sudden, he's done a complete backflip on a whole lot of things that he was saying and changed direction. So he was the one that definitely caught us by surprise, out of everyone else. But many of the others, I've sort of looked at a number of these, like, Chris Master John and all these sort of things. They all had some underlying Ray Peatism sort of thinking, in terms of reductionist thinking. So I always thought that these sort of people are always susceptible to that sort of thinking, that they would go from the sort of low carb community across to the low fat community nearly, or somewhere in between in this sort of Ray Peat world. So I'm not surprised that would happen. But it's disappointing, but what can you do? It's just, he's into Coca-Cola as well. Oh God, it's crazy. Oh yeah, it's got sugar. It's got sugar. It doesn't have poofa in it. It doesn't have poofa. It's got sugar, and poofa's worse. Oh God. Yes, in some regards, poofa, modern day poofa coming from vegetable oils, industrial vegetable oils, yes, due to the deuterium and the damaging aldehydes and the damaging primary and secondary oxidative products, but not because of the fat itself. It's more due to these other things, and also the higher level of plant poofa. When you extract it, it becomes more vulnerable to oxidation and damage. Yeah, that's a reality. But it doesn't surprise me. It's funny.